Chapter 2. November 7, 1876, Election Day. It's cold, damp and raining outside. It's mid-morning and Governor Tilden is dressed in a tailored black suit with a red carnation pinned on the lapel. He enters a building near his home in Gramercy Park where he'll cast his ballot for himself. While inside, he accepts some early congratulations and thanks people from his neighborhood for their support. He makes no assumptions, at this time, whether he will win or not, but he is pleased by his friends' care and devotion. Once outside, his personal carriage driver is waiting. The driver opens the carriage door and watches with care when his boss climbs into the coach. Samuel instructs the driver to take him to campaign headquarters. While quietly displeased with the wet and damp weather conditions, Samuel's coach driver maneuvered his horses slowly through the crowd. He halts the carriage as close as he can to the entrance of the Everett House campaign headquarters, in the midst of hundreds of well-wishers that waited in the rain to get a glimpse of the candidate they wanted elected as the next president. Tilden supporters nicknamed him, the greatest reformer and greatest Democrat ever. In less than 2 years as governor of New York, Mr. Tilden earned the admiration of the voters. He gave the people efficient government while cutting their taxes nearly in half. He impeached 8 corrupt judges, and took down the Canal Ring and Tammany Hall's boss Tweed, who stole millions of tax dollars. Samuel, not wanting to disappoint anyone, steps out onto the street and works his way through the crowd, shaking hands and offering his gratitude for their support. When he finally makes it to the entrance to the building, he turns and waves again to the cheering crowd that are waving their hats and handkerchiefs. He enters the building in good spirits, but contemplates after experiencing the large gathering, that it might be a good idea to have someone with him when he goes out again, to get him into his carriage safely. Once inside campaign headquarters, Samuel greets and extends his appreciation to the devoted campaign workers in the room who have worked night and day to help him get elected. Some are busy shuffling paperwork while others count voter returns on a large tally board, hanging on the wall at the far end of the room. Samuel walks toward the tote board and is quickly greeted by his nephew William and other campaign managers, John Bigelow, Mr. Dan Magon and Congressman Abram Hewitt. William suggests to his uncle, "You looked like you were having a good time with the crowd out there." Not giving his uncle time to respond, he adds, "People can get a little rambunctious. When you leave, I'll send 2 of our men with you." Samuel nods in agreement. Colonel William T. Pelton, Tilden's nephew, lived in Samuel's home after his mother Mary Tilden Pelton, Samuel's older and only sister, moved in to manage his household affairs at the Gramercy estate. William lost his father young and loved his uncle dearly. Samuel's influence on William led him into the arena of politics. Tilden felt the same affection for his nephew but did not feel he was as qualified as his other campaign managers and warned them not to allow him any special privileges because of their blood relations. After attaining the rank of colonel in the Union Army, and upon his release from the military, Colonel Pelton became the manager and secretary of the Democratic National Committee. Unbeknown to Samuel, his nephew's involvement would cause him problems after the election, including their close family ties. John Bigelow, a man in his early 60s, is Tilden's closest confidant and neighbor at Gramercy. He is an American diplomat, writer, lawyer and, with William Cullen Bryant, part owner and editor of the New York Evening Post. He writes editorials enthusiastically supporting free trade and denouncing slavery, an issue he and Samuel strongly agree upon. In 1861 he traveled to Paris as consul general under the Lincoln administration and in 1865–66 served as the U.S. minister to France. While in France, Bigelow was instrumental in generating support for the Union cause and discouraged Napoleon III from undertaking an imperial expedition to Mexico. Samuel treasures their friendship and John's advice. Bigelow steps up beside William and announces to Samuel, "Bets are running 100–80 in your favor." Samuel, delighted by the news and numbers, responds modestly, "Are they? You can tell this already? It's hardly afternoon." "We suspect a landslide," Dan Magon adds. Megon is another of Tilden's campaign managers and the chairman of the New York State Democratic Committee. Congressman Abram Hewitt, chairman of the National Democratic Committee as well as a businessman who has been recently elected to Congress, chimes in. Telegrams are telling of victory every minute. Samuel stares at Hewitt for a moment with pause and Hewitt questions, "Do you doubt it?" Samuel, not wanting to seem too confident, smiles and turns back to the tote board. "I certainly do not doubt your expertise." With both Dan Megon and Congressman Abram Hewitt, Samuel feels he has a winning team working on his behalf. He also knows he has an advantage over Hayes, with both the Republican and Democratic national campaign headquarters being located in New York City. It gives him more opportunity to micromanage this campaign than it does Hayes, who resides in Ohio and cannot easily access his managers. Chapter 3. Tilden is President-elect. A few hours later, in front of the Tilden mansion at Gramercy Park, hundreds of spectators and supporters have congested the streets, holding and waving their campaign signs for Tilden. This is a much larger crowd than the one he had just experienced a few hours earlier in front of the Everett House. The people have gathered in the streets near the front and on both sides of the park, a few feet from his home. They're excited to be a part of history and to get a closer look at their next president when he arrives. Standing in the bay windows in the front of the house, Mary Tilden Pelton watches the growing crowd with a few of her closest friends and other family members that frequent the Tilden estate. Mary is Samuel's older sister and William's mother. After becoming a wealthy attorney, Samuel invited his sister to move in with her son so she could take charge of his household. Sarah, a well-known New York socialite and one of Mary's dearest friends, stands nearby with the others, waiting for Samuel's arrival. Each of these women is filled with just as much anticipation as the spectators outdoors. Mary, always her younger brother's protector, becomes more concerned for Samuel's safety as she glances at the enormous amount of well-wishers that have gathered outside. With no open access through the mass of people, she mutters, "He'll need to clear a path to the stairs." Mr. Smith, Samuel's personal secretary, is a quiet, shy man in his late 40s. Along with his assistant, he is seated behind a desk in the reading room, busily receiving telegrams. The reading room is located just off the living room, where the smaller crowd of Tilden family and friends have gathered. Several butlers and housekeepers quietly go in and out of the dining area, setting up a lunch buffet. Mary, not moving from the window, remarks with again concerned, "It's still raining." One of the four socialites responds with glee, "A little rain won't melt them, Mary. Your brother earned their admiration and the people love him. All of us here are overjoyed for both of you." Mary looks back from the window at the ladies and inquires, "Would there be any interest amongst my nearest and dearest friends wanting to fill the position of First Lady?" One of the women blurts out, "Of course." Another declares, "I want to be the first to dance with Samuel at the inaugural ball." Sarah, without skipping a beat, snobbishly quips, "After me." Mary is amused by the friendly backbiting between her friends and pushes back the window drapes a little further so she can see better. Good-naturedly she scolds, "Ladies, remember your manners. After all, we are high society." The ladies giggle and continue to peer out the window and enjoy the exhilaration of the crowd. Outside in front of the mansion, hundreds of people continue to wave their hats and handkerchiefs, focusing on the arrival of Samuel's horse and carriage. They consider it an honor, rain or not, so they can be the first to congratulate the next President of the United States. Many have heard by early rumors from newsmen that Samuel has already beaten Hayes by thousands of popular votes. The crowd, growing more enormous by the minute, does not seem to care that they could catch a cold with the damp rain falling steady from the overcast sky. Many of them believe that just like a wedding couple when getting married on a rainy day, it's a sign of good luck for Samuel's election. Working the horse and carriage carefully through the gathering crowd, Samuel's driver calls out, "Coming through. Make room for me to pass, please. I have with me the next President of the United States." Samuel, amused by the driver's remarks, calls out to him, "A bit premature, don't you think?" The driver turns back to look at Samuel through the carriage window. The presidency is yours and they know it. It's my honor to drive you. Inside the carriage and sitting opposite Samuel are two good-sized men, former Civil War soldiers. William had earlier asked them to escort his uncle through the crowd safely, and the men felt privileged to do so. Security was never an issue before this day for Samuel, but with all the people approaching him he figured it was a good idea just for today. He was hoping that once the excitement wore down, it would be something he wouldn't have to depend on again. More than anything, Samuel cherished his privacy and enjoyed his freedom to take walks and to drive his personal horse and carriage through the streets of New York City. Inside the mansion, Mary moves away from the window toward the buffet table to inspect the food. He must be famished, she says to no one in particular. Sarah walks over to Mary, takes her by the hand and leads her toward the foyer and the front entrance. Sarah, energized by all the excitement, notes, "The food looks just fine. Come, let's go outside, this is a once-in-a-lifetime event and I don't want to miss 1 minute more." Smiling at her friend's obvious excitement, Mary follows Sarah's lead to the front entrance without argument. The other ladies excitedly agree and follow Mary and Sarah outside onto the front porch landing. Cheers fill the air as the women become visible on the top of the stairs. Sarah, Mary, and the other socialites are all smiles, enjoying the moment while waiting for Samuel to open his carriage door. Now at a full stop, with the carriage driver using his equestrian skills to keep his horses steady and calm. After a few moments the door of the horse-drawn carriage opens and Samuel's two guards are the first to step out onto the street. They instruct the crowd, "Step back please." Samuel steps out of the carriage, carefully planting his feet on the vehicle's iron footsteps, then onto the street. Several spectators move closer, while others further back mirthfully wave their handkerchiefs and hats. The two guards continue to politely nudge back some and Samuel moves forward slowly, reaching out to shake the hands of his patrons. Elated by the experience, Samuel grips hands while inching through the crowd toward his mansion's front stairs. Thoughts rush through him like a waterfall, taking in the beautiful moment. He's elated by the people's warmth, verifying their belief in him and confirming his trust in them. "I can feel my heart pound and my body filling with a feeling of affection and goodness all around me. Are they so sure I am elected president?" Samuel notices Mary, Sarah, and the other ladies at the top of the stairs enjoying the excitement with the sea of people before them as he moves toward them. He acknowledges them with a wave of his hand and they wave back. While he moves through the swells of well-wishers to the front steps, he continues to express his pleasure with their overwhelming approval of his future presidency. The entire day has been surreal to him and he knows that it doesn't get any better than this. Mary, leaning toward Sarah, quietly says, "He has aspired to this goal for such a long time. I can hardly believe it is happening." Sarah places her hand on Mary's arm. "I would be honored to be his wife and your sister-in-law, Mary. However, Samuel must be proper and ask for my hand. So far, I've heard no indication of interest from him." Mary is pleased by Sarah's declaration and gently grips her hand. Samuel finally makes his way up the steps to the women. He reaches out to Mary, takes her hand and kisses her affectionately on the cheek. He acknowledges each of the other ladies before turning to wave to the crowd again before turning back to the door and entering the house with the women. Once inside, the sound of the people chanting Tilden's name is clearly heard in the background. In an area of the street not far from the house, a group of reporters and illustrators from differing newspapers are jotting notes and drawing on paper pads. Amongst this group is John C. Reed, managing editor of the New York Times. He is not full of merriment like the others but is observing the throng of people around him. He's frowning and after a few moments Reed turns and walks the few blocks to where his horse is tied at a post hitch. With a slight show of disgust on his face, he stuffs his notebook into his saddlebag, mounts the steed and trots away from the Gramercy Park event. Inside the mansion, Samuel and the ladies have moved into the reading room, discussing the day's events. Their chatter is boisterous and is distracting Mr. Smith and his assistant from doing their work. The telegram machine keeps ticking non-stop and Mr. Smith continues deciphering telegrams at his desk. With the help of his assistant, they continue to translate the pulses of current, deflecting the electromagnet marker, which produces written codes onto strips of paper, dependent upon the telegraph. In the year to follow, 1877, a rival technology will be developed that will again change the face of communication. Alexander Graham Bell's notebook entry of March 10, 1876 describes his successful experiment with the telephone. Speaking through the instrument to his assistant, Thomas A. Watson, who is in the next room, Bell utters these famous first words, "Mr. Watson, come here, I want to see you." At the time of this current presidential election, telephone technology is not yet available, but will be wired into the White House during 1877, thus making it the newfangled way to communicate across the nation. Smith, while reviewing one of the wires, briefly looks up for a moment at Samuel. Catching his glance, Samuel asks, "More good news?" Smith nods in agreement, motions a brief wave and returns without further pause back to organizing the ciphers by significance. Samuel, being a man of good work ethic and concentration himself, is not offended by the short response from Smith. He realizes the chattering ladies are distracting Mr. Smith from doing his work and he politely suggests to the women, "Perhaps we should go into the next room to chat and have a bite to eat." He leads the ladies toward the buffet, favoring Sarah whom he has on his right arm. As they walk into the next room they see a beautifully arranged buffet of fresh fruits, teas, sandwiches and flowers. Samuel comments to Sarah, "This is turning out to be an eventful day." Sarah, without hesitation responds, "Poor Mr. Hayes, he never stood a chance against you." While filling a small plate with food, Samuel replies, "The Ohio governor is a worthy opponent." "He may be worthy, dear brother," Mary chimes in, "but he's no match for your popularity in this election." With a smile on his face and a gleam in his eye, Samuel turns to Sarah, "I don't know what I would do without her." A few minutes later everyone is seated comfortably and eating. Sarah turns to Samuel and declares, "I have a lively new pink silk I will wear to your inaugural ball and I claim the first dance with you." Due to his shy nature and the boldness of her declaration, Samuel replies, "I'd be honored." Sarah is pleased by Samuel's response and turns to Mary. Before she says a word, Mary gently squeezes Sarah's hand and says, "We'll discuss details next week over afternoon tea."